stream. We tried to get the cat cam going. She's in a really full level of energy right now. So we'll see. She's just like running back and forth across the door. So like all I would see was just a blur of cat going back and forth. Welcome everyone. Some of you I have seen like recently, because this week I tried out doing study with me streams, which I decided to do on this channel, even though that might have turned out to be something I regret, but we'll find out later, because essentially I've been having some issues with getting Spotify to only play the royalty-free music I tell it to. Well, I don't know, we could get into that or not. But yes, welcome. We all survived another week. It was like the week of lots of religions having holidays. Is Passover this week. It was Good Friday. I think it's Easter today. I think that's today. And what other holiday? There's also like a large Hindu holiday last week. Anyway, all the religions are in cahoots. And then, most important maybe of all holidays, is that tomorrow is the tax deadline for most people in the US, except for Maine and Massachusetts residents that get one extra day because tomorrow is a holiday for them. So, oh my God, yeah, in Canada, it's Ramadan this week, or well, it's Ramadan this month as well. We're like halfway through, three weeks into Ramadan. Yeah, everybody's got holidays going on right now. So, you know, we've all survived, and tax day is tomorrow, which is the real holiday of them all. What we have for today, this is going to be the last time we get an in-focus version of these. Oh, the donut light is dead. It's okay. We don't need the donut light. So we have an ube biko donut for today. It has coconut flakes and then like a rice ball in the top, and an ube, which is like purple sweet potato coating. Sounds nice and exciting. Cheryl says next week is Orthodox Easter. Yeah, so it's only like a week off this year, as opposed to sometimes it's like 2 weeks or longer. Cheryl says, I remember we got Dora a new ball. Gotta get it to her. Well, you could try to throw it at your screen and see if she can get it through the screen. We can switch to the coconut one. She will enjoy that. Yeah, so, you know, very exciting. Oh, right. Aaron would like to remind me that I am supposed to be showing the comments, not him. I'm supposed to be running the stream myself this week, but I kind of forgot that. So yes, here's the... Oh, we're still having issues, though, with the displaying of it. Is it possible? Did I change my aspect ratio? Let's find out. Yeah. Anyway. Ablejack says, talk about finances as my Easter gift basket. Well, the thing that we're going to have to talk about is really actually nice and fun, I think. Kind of fun. Essentially, the housing market in the US and Canada and Australia and a lot of Europe is extremely depressing right now. If anybody has been trying to buy recently, they are aware of what a absolute shit show it's been. So essentially, there's a ton of things that go into why the housing market is so screwed up, but the very simple answer is that we don't have enough inventory. So, right, what happens with supply and demand? What happens if you don't have enough supply? Well, then it's out of equilibrium with demand and prices go up. And that is what is happening in the US. We have, I mean, a typical home has seen like a 40% increase in the amount overall that it is worth since February of 2020. We're seeing like huge increases in home prices. We've also seen like higher mortgage rates, essentially because the Federal Reserve has just raised the interest rates in order to try to slow down inflation, which is being driven partially by the fact that housing prices are higher. So it's a nice like persistence that we are going on. A lot of people have wondered, are we actually in a housing bubble? Like, most of us remember the housing crisis during the Great Recession. And that housing crisis was brought on not so much by a lack of inventory that was driving up prices, and nor was the financial crisis brought on by that, but by the fact that like the buying was out of control because lending restrictions had pretty much been dropped. The, banks were giving out no assets, no income loans where they weren't verifying people's assets or their income. Essentially, they were lending money to people based on nothing, not whether or not they could repay them. And so we ended up with a huge amount of some subprime loans. So that is part of what made the bubble burst, is house prices were going up and up and up because essentially the demand was being driven by the fact that anybody could get lent to for a house. People were out there buying way more houses than was reasonable. Small time investors were buying way more houses than were reasonable. So, it's definitely interesting to see what is going to happen. It's definitely interesting to see kind of what is going to happen in the near term. So the big thing that needs to be fixed, one, the good news is we are not seeing these like subprime mortgages. In fact, we would argue that because of Dodd-Frank and all of the things that were passed after the financial crisis, lending is actually getting even tighter right now, where even if you've got an excellent credit score and you have a good down payment, part of the reason that lending has been hard to get is because house prices have been going up so much. So having enough of a down payment in reserve when the house price has gone up by 40% from what it would have been 2 years ago means it's getting harder and harder to get lent to right now. Additionally, a lot of the houses being bought right now are not being bought by people. They are being bought by, investing companies. They are being bought by iBuyers, which are essentially algorithms that look at trying to buy houses. And because of that, we are really experiencing we're not experiencing the same kind of mortgages being lent to people that can't necessarily pay them back, which is good news because it does indicate that we're less likely to have a like follow-on recession from this, right? But the downside of this is that there is probably no way that we are going to see serious downward pressure on prices because prices have been going up a ton. And we in the immediate term, it's unlikely that we're going to see the prices drop relatively soon. Siren Eye says, I got my home exactly a year ago this month. The mortgage rate for me was 2.99% for a 30-year. It's over 5% now. The prices haven't come down much, if any, so that makes it really difficult for folks. Yes, 100%. You just stated that quite exactly. The amount that mortgage payments are really going up because of the increased mortgage rates means that we're probably going to see a slowdown in demand because in addition to the prices having gone up, the fact that estimated mortgage payments are going up a ton with the increase in interest rates. The good news is the whole reason that interest rates are going up is because that is going to help put a lid on the massive inflation that we are seeing. So, they're all connected with one another here. And the fact that the interest rates are going up, that is the number one tool at the disposal of the Federal Reserve in order to control inflation, which is what they do. I will also say that part of the reason that we are having such crazy price increases and such competitive markets for buying a house is because the mortgage rates have been historically low. I mean, shockingly historically low. A 2.99%, we were seeing mortgages in the 2.5% range. That's historical amounts. When we have seen inflation higher or high as it is now, currently it's high. It's not the highest it has been since, we had very high inflation during the oil crisis in, the 70s and 80s. At that point, you were seeing mortgages, the average mortgage in price for rate was in the 19%. So you have to recognize that, yes, we can complain all we want about a 5% mortgage rate, but the effect of this is hopefully going to be pulling down inflation in the near term, which is then going to eventually, hopefully, bring prices down. But looking out, we cannot expect, because inventory is still quite low. We can't really expect to see the housing prices come down in the next 6 months. We're probably looking a year out or a year and a half out. Siren Eye says 2.99% for a 30-year mortgage. I mean, I figured that's what you meant. Subprime meaning below optimal. I've always wondered that. So what subprime means when it comes to mortgages, yeah, I mean, it essentially means below optimal, but the definition of it is that these mortgages were not the kind of mortgages that you would want to buy, right? So, debt is bought. It is a security that is traded. And when it is being bought by the people that make profit off of it with interest rates, which are lenders, when that debt is bought, they rate the type of debt that it is. And mortgages were always considered extremely secure debt because people pay their mortgages, was the argument always made. Like, even if they might not pay back their credit cards, they might not pay back their student loans, they would always pay their mortgage. However, that was also based on the idea that it was relatively hard to get a mortgage and that there was a stopgap in place, through all of the regulation around mortgage lending. But mortgage lenders started to realize that they could make more money by reselling mortgages than on the actual lending of mortgages themselves. So they had an incentive to sell as many mortgages as possible and less of an incentive to make sure that people were able to pay their mortgages back. And because of that, they started doing what was called subprime lending. So they were lending to people that were not necessarily good risks. They were people that didn't have enough assets, enough income in order to borrow the houses. They were investment companies that were way over leveraged and were just buying tons and tons of houses and unable to pay it back. So, and what caused the financial recession? Well, one of the big things was that all of these mortgages were being rolled up into a thing called mortgage-backed securities. Mortgage-backed securities were considered a super safe investment because mortgages, people pay them all the time, right? However, a lot of these they were getting rated very high by the credit rating agencies because they're mortgages. We have all these protections in place. People pay their mortgages. However, unfortunately, they started getting worse and worse mortgages packaged in to these mortgage-backed securities, and people started defaulting on their mortgages. And once people started defaulting, you started to have, pensions and retirement plans and everyday investors that were invested in these mortgage-backed securities, including not everyday investors, but the massive banks and funds, hedge funds that were buying these that got bailed out. These banks and pension funds, that were buying these were suffering with the fact that they had what was relatively, they thought, a low risk security in their investments, but instead were actually very risky because they were not getting paid back. So, yeah. Mimi says, hi from Buffalo, ending my spring break on a high note here. The housing market. Hi, Mimi. Also, I got your letter yesterday. It's so cute. Mimi sent me back a letter. I'm just going to back a letter from being a member of the Personal Finance Society. It was very cute. Wow, that leads very well into Craig's note, which was, we regularly receive handwritten letters from local real estate agents offering to buy our home. Yeah, I mean, right now, the housing market is the high note, as Mimi put it. It is just absolutely, it's definitely absolutely horrendous to see what is happening with the housing market, because in particular, as Siren Eye has pointed out, that right now we are in a very different state than we were in 2007. We have a lot of qualified buyers being plentiful and the inventory is not. So Here's like possibly the good news for you. There are a bunch of different metrics that we follow when it comes to looking at the housing market. And one of them, so we look at like the median home price, which is up 20% over what it was a year ago. So scary. Right. But we also look at one really great piece of information that is should give us some optimism, which are what are called new housing starts. And new housing starts essentially meant starting to build new housing. And like I mentioned, inventory is really low. And when inventory is low, that means prices go up, which is part of what we're experiencing right now. Part of the reason inventory is so low is because ain't nobody investing during 2020. Like after March 2020, nobody was out there being like, we need to build new houses, because nobody knew what was going on with the economy, with certainty in the economy, especially as a bunch of people were working from home. There was even a question of like, should we be building new houses in the same areas we once did if people aren't commuting to work anymore? You know, the virus was running the economy, so we weren't starting it. Additionally, like a lot of construction halted. Like it was technically essential work, but you know, a lot of people that were paying for construction projects were essentially like, we're holding off until we know what's happening with funding. So nobody was building for quite a while. And then after we kind of got over the fact that nobody was building, wanted to start building again, but then we weren't able to start new projects because of supply chain issues. So in addition to the fact that labor is really hard to come by right now, and labor is one of the main components of building new housing, right? Like what is one of the most important things in building new houses? Construction labor. And it has been very hard to hire labor in this market for a bunch of reasons, one of which being a lot of people did not want to work in person on a job site. There are people that, you know, are still having to take care of family members or children that are not in school or have been disabled by COVID-19. So like there's just been a lot going on that has meant that the employment market is screwed up as well. So all of this to say, I'm talking way too fast because I get excited when I get to talk about how all the things are connected. But the good news is that new home starts in February 2022 was the highest it has been since 2006. So that is what is particularly awesome. Like it soared to 6.8%. That's a seasonally adjusted rate because obviously more home starts happen in July. It is well above the market forecast. It's the highest it's been since June of 2006. So that is good news. One thing that we are a little concerned about, we look at housing starts, which is actually putting new housing in the ground. And then the other thing they look at is applications for building permits. So even though us personally have a building permit application that we've been dealing with, I wonder which month it'll actually technically be filed for us. And if you don't know, we're building a triplex, and we have a channel called The House Files that you can subscribe to. The links down in the description if you want to hear more about that project. But anyway, building permits are slightly down, but they're still like above where the seasonally adjusted expectation was. So Dean says, my nephew works in construction materials delivery, been rushed off his feed for months and months. Yeah, I mean, it's really a huge challenge. And then additionally, like we've got all of these commodity prices going up right now because of the Ukrainian war. So commodities have all shot up because a large component of commodities is the price of oil, but also the commodities market in general just gets overinflated in times of war because what do you need to fight war? Well, you need things like metal, you need fuel, all sorts of things like that. So, yeah, so it's definitely been interesting to see what is kind of happening with that. So even once the supply chain problems are worked out, the components that are going into building housing right now have gone up. Fuel is a large component into construction because even though we're not seeing you burning that much gas on a job site, right? Like you're not out there like your tiny chainsaw that is going into building a single family home is not like a huge fuel component, but you have to think about all the fuel that's necessary to get all of the parts to build a house. So lumber, fuel is a major component of lumber because it's a huge component of cutting down trees, taking the trees to a mill, getting them sawed at a mill, picking them up at a mill, driving them to where they need to go. So fuel is a huge component of lumber. It's a huge component of steel. The actual like smelting of metals requires a ton of energy. So that's a huge part of it. Like steel mills require a lot of energy to produce, which is why they tend to be located near hydroelectricity because that's relatively cheaper, or in Iceland near volcanoes. And so there's just a lot of fuel costs that are going in. And when we see our everyday gas prices rise, it rises the cost of going into new housing. So yeah. Anna says, I'm not sure how this works in Mexico, but probably very similar. So Mexico has not been seeing quite as, I looked it up like when you joined the chat because I was actually really curious about this. Mexico hasn't seen like quite the raise that has been happening in the US because it looks like you're getting a little less speculative buying by investment folks. However, there's been certain cities that are destinations for US immigrants coming to Mexico that have work from home abilities and have more purchasing power because salaries are higher generally in the US than Mexico, that are going and trying to buy houses because essentially they've been priced out of maybe California. A bunch of cities in Texas are the fastest rising cities for the cost of housing. Austin in particular and Dallas are having like crazy increases. So people that have the ability to work from home are kind of switching to Mexico, looking at the Mexico market, and that is affecting some of the cities in Mexico. Siren Eye says, keep us updated on the building permit. Well, the current status is that there is no house there, and the way to get the final building permit issued is that we have to sign off that the house is totally destroyed now. So, and then wait for, I think, the city to just move it from one pile to another, which they say will take a month. But relevant to our interest here today, the mortgage has already been approved for building this not unsizable house. And it has a rate. What rate was it locked in at? 2.75, I thought. It's like locked in at a low rate, 2.75. However, due to some like back and forth with the bank about whether or not the house had to be demolished prior to granting the mortgage or they wanted it before, what is it? 3.625. And it's commercial property, so it'll have a higher interest rate than you would for a single family home. But so it's 3.62% got approved. Then news of the interest rates gone up. They essentially said, oh, actually, we said that we would get it to you only if the house was there, but actually we need the building permit and the house has to come down for the final building permit to be issued. All of this led to essentially like an extra month delay on the bank's side. Like that is the bank's fault because they told us not to tear the house down. So we asked for that to be extended. It is extended through the end of this month, end of May, and we are like in a race to, I guess, get the city to actually like stamp the piece of paper of the building permit on time because everything's been approved. There's nothing to approve in the building permit. Like everything has been reviewed a bazillion times over the past 2 years. It's literally just the final issuance of it in order for the mortgage to close, and they said it can take up to a month. And so we're like just sweating bullets over here that it actually gets approved before the extended lock-in of the mortgage rate expires. Be Queer Bake Stuff says a lot of construction wood has a lot of petroleum products in it. Yeah, exactly. Like there's just like a lot of things a lot of things that require fuel when it comes to construction. So, anyway, that's all to be said. Do we want, what I am trying to end on an uplifting note is that one, I do think the fact that mortgage rates have gone up so much will likely slow down a lot of the buying. One, it might also slow down some of the iBuying that we're seeing and the investor buying that we're seeing. And if we slow down the buying, we're slowing down the demand, and we're going to slow down the housing price raises. The downside of this is that is still very much the people that it is most squeezing are people that are new buyers, first-time buyers, because essentially they don't have equity to move out of whatever their current house is that has inflated in value in the same way. So they've got cash that, you know, hasn't been accruing nearly the kind of capital that the houses have been for home buyers that are already in the market. So, you know, we're definitely seeing some really depressing things, like a ton of places going for cash offers that are 100K over asking. You know, amounts where it's really not, it's getting increasingly out of reach for the average person. I think the median home price in Portland, so let's look it up right here. Our median home price in Portland a couple years ago was like 300. So now the median home price in Portland is $584,000, but the median household income in Portland is about 1/10 of that, as far as I understand. We're slightly up now. We are up to $67,000 is the median household income in Portland. So essentially, the median house is 10 times the median household income, which is not usually the most that you would get approved for is 5 times your annual income. And that's assuming, you know, that you don't have any other kinds of debt like student loan debt or, and that you've got the best credit score and that you're, you know, getting approved for kind of on the lower end of an interest rate. And 10 times is just not affordable to a ton of people. So, yeah, it's definitely depressing. I'm not going to say it's uplifting, but the way that we're going to exercise our demons about it is that we're going to look at some truly bananas Zillow listings. So let's see what we can pull up. I had some of these submitted by different people. Let's see. Camera with iPad. There we go. Look at this. Okay. So this one was sent in on the forums, which was in Colorado Springs. The realtor described this as a little slice of hell and would not sell it to anyone unless they smelled it first. It was a sales pitch, did not exaggerate the situation. Wood-rotted exteriors, spray-painted obsidians on nearly every open surface and appliance, poop, both human and animal, everywhere, plastic bins full of poop, sledgehammer holes in the wall, a freezer full of rotten meat, 2 dead cats in a bathroom, and an empty bottle of Pure Leaf tea on a counter. The residential biohazard was a result of a tenant evicted by former owners and landlord after months of lapsed rent payments. So, look, ooh, someone flipped it for 200. So it eventually, this is the same house. Look at how much it improved. So this was some of the pictures from it. So someone flipped it. Lord almighty. Let's see if we can look at some of these pictures on this. Wow. This is totally worth $600,000. Apparently they did manage to clean it up. I mean, props to whoever bought it for, but that's really depressing that that is more than $500,000 is what they went on. To be honest, that deserves a label better than flip. They recovered or restored that house. That's true. Like, honestly, if you're putting in that much work, that's not really a flip, right? Because it's not just... but this is what it looks like now, apparently. Gosh. Wow, they really went crazy with the HDR in these photos. They're like... Yep. Kenneth says, I'm wary of Flip. I spend too much time on home inspection TikTok. I just found home inspection TikTok. It is a delightful thing. You should definitely be wary of Flips. I think that it looked like a lot of the core of that house was actually fine. It was like needed. It appears mostly cosmetic. And not oratory. What do you call it? Olfactory, right? Yeah, decent staging, Cheryl says. Yeah, they did the work. They put the work in. Sanitized, recovered, and restored, or maybe probably employed someone to do the nasty stuff. I'm assuming that this would have to be a biohazard cleanup, in which case you have to be licensed in order to do that kind of things. An olfactory experience. This one is from Portland. This house went for 57% over asking. It was up for $499,000. And it ended up going for $627,500. I like how they're advertising it as a colonial style revival, but like, look at this. It's falling apart. This was a $627,000 house. What's bananas to me is this was over asking price. Honestly, this room just looks like it needs a good scrub. Maybe it's the angle, though, that makes it look better. Cheryl asks what neighborhood this is in. This is in Arlington Heights, which is in Southwest Portland. Apparently Meowmalade from the forums lives down the street from it. Also, they had a bunch of blackberry brambles, which is, any Oregonian knows that sounds really nice and wonderful, but they're actually hell to get out. And like you can't just dig up blackberry in Oregon. You actually need like a deep digger or like to rent a bunch of goats to remove the blackberry, which is another thing that you can do. Cheryl says goats. Yeah, it's true. Although I lived at a place that had like 87 acres and the amount of time that it takes, yeah. B says, are people buying it for the land? This is nuts. Actually, interestingly enough, it got flipped and, not flipped. I should say restored. I don't think we should be mean to these houses, because, like, I don't know if we should call it flip because I think there's a bunch of negative associations with that, but they actually did not turn it into a teardown. They ended up, restoring it. I wish I could find pictures of it. Apparently they did a bunch of work on it and it looks a lot better now. So yeah. Siren Eye says horses might eat it faster. The problem with horses when it comes to blackberry, 1, they can't get deep into things, and 2, they don't eat the whole part of the bush. Goats will eat everything, so that's why goats are the best at removing blackberry, because you need them to remove the entire bush, including like the roots, because the root structure is like really out of control. Christy says, keep the bathroom, tear down the rest. Yeah, what I really struggle with is like the house that we just tore down did not look nearly this bad on the outside and is like 20 years older than this, and the foundation was like really terrible. Although I will say, I guess someone said that their real estate agent told them to like aim past the late 1920s when it came to foundations, because that's when they started figuring out what to do with foundations. And that was essentially like the leading, yeah, so this is 1927. Maybe the foundation is in better shape. B says, sheesh. What's crazy is like, that's a steal for that neighborhood and for how many bedrooms that is. Okay. We had another one submitted on the forums. This is in Australia, so we're getting some non-US ones here. This is an uninhabitable Sydney home selling for over $4 million. So these are dollar reduced, but that's like 3 million US. It's not, you know. Yeah, so it sold for 4.7 million on on Saturday from when this article is written, despite having no bathroom or kitchen. So this was a teardown, and apparently it's worth 3 million. The vendors purchased the property in 2005 for around 1.1 million, intended to restore the property to its original condition, but retained their minds. It sat empty for many years, and agents received hundreds of calls from buyers wanting to snap up the home even before it was listed for sale. And the Sydney housing market has been having, like, really depressing things. But look at that. Like, that is, like, stuff worth saving, but apparently it's worth just tearing down. So $4 million reduce. I know. It's, like, out of control. Dollar reduce are Australian dollars. Sire and I did the conversions for us. That's 3,471,118. Thank you with the hot to trot conversions there. Reading that number was challenging for me. So yesterday I wasn't feeling well, and I ended up spending a large part of the day on the couch watching this Indian, like, made for Amazon Prime film about, or TV series about, like, essentially wedding planners in India. But what is important to know is it's pretty much entirely about money, because it's like Jane Austen, and that everything is just about money, because it was like about the ultra wealthy wedding planning industry in India. And I really struggled with this when I lived in India, because the Indian numbering system is different than the one that I am used to. So in the US, we do all of our numbers in groups of 3, and we separate them by commas. So, you know, in a lot of Europe, they'll separate them by periods instead. But essentially, you know, you'll have the hundreds, the thousands, the hundreds of thousands, millions. What is really, like, hard about India is that they do 3 for the first group of number, the hundreds, but then they have different names, and each is only a group of 2. So the conversions are, like, very challenging for me to do just casually, because they'll be like lakh and crore, and they're in groups of 2. And then additionally, rupees are, like, trade at a really high exchange rate to USD. So it would take me forever when they'd be like 2 lakhs. I would be like, oh my God, how many US dollars is that? And I'd have to think about it. Like, it took me forever when I would, like, read the newspaper when I lived in India. Yeah, because, like, 2 lakh is $216,000. Yeah, lakh and crore, etc. I know, but it's super confusing because the numbers go in, like, a different way. They go like 000, comma, XX, comma, XX. Dean says, same in Nepal. Yeah, also, I pretty much, most of the countries in Southeast Asia, so Pakistan, Bangladesh, India, Nepal, I don't think Malaysia does it that way. Let's actually find out. Malaysia numbering system. Anyway, I was having to do lots of conversions. This is just giving me information on telephone numbers. Apparently this is not useful. Oh, Aaron has linked in the chat to the Indian number system. Okay. Let's look at some more of these. All right. So this one isn't necessarily depressing for what it's being sold for. However, it's like a dude who was running a cult house in Woodstock, Connecticut, and it's $6 million. And theoretically was possibly, unfortunately, running like a sex trafficking ring possibly out of it. But I mean, this is a house. Oh, look at this. Like, that kitchen actually looks not good to cook in because your work triangle is too big. I guess maybe theoretically you have multiple people cooking there. Be Queer Make Stuff says, this is a house. No, that is something else. Yes, correct. It is something else. It's like a weird castle situation. That bathroom, though, I mean, what is happening there? It's just, like, I want to know what possesses you to be like, this is what I'm gonna build. Cheryl says, it looks as bad as the castle that sold in the Northwest Hills. Was there a castle in the Northwest Hills of Portland? I need a link if you can find it. This is like, it's got like a moat. It's got a full-on moat. Oh my god. That's not a small moat. I thought that, I didn't realize it was gonna be like a proper drawbridge and stuff. Yeah, so for just a cool $60 million, that too can be yours. Dean says, truly hideous. There's some parts of it I kind of like. I mean, there's some parts that I'm like, yeah, I could go for having a moat, but like, there's definitely some interior design decisions that I do not agree with. Also, it's like not done. Is that just like the outside? It seems like maybe it's not entirely done. It is still on the market, so, you know, your mortgage would just be $359,000 a month. No big deal. This is, I want to see what they describe it as. Stunning, one-of-a-kind property to build an amaze to capture the imagination of an individual who relishes outstanding craftsman and superior design. When was this born? It was built in 2010. The place holds some secrets. Yes, I agree. Kate says, I spent a lot of time discussing the spice rack in that kitchen. I will wait, in the Portland one or in this one? Should we go there and look at the spice rack in the kitchen? Let's find out. It's so hard to scroll through this, like, at a reasonable... Where's the spice? Oh my god! Look at that spice rack. Oh, I can't zoom in anymore. It's, like, in the center pole. Come on, iPad. This is the whole point of you, is that I can zoom in. Well, that is what the spice rack looks like. That's quite the situation there. Aura says, born, not built seems appropriate. Yeah, I mean, that's not really built, right? That's, like, born. Siren Eye says, what do you think with the housing market with the Fed rising interest rates to battle inflations? Pricing value goes down or just stop rising as fast? I don't think that we're going to see immediate recovery as far as prices going down in the very near term. I think that we're probably 6 to 18 months out from actually seeing any downward pressure on prices. I think it's more likely that, yes, you're correct. We're just going to see demand, like we're going to see price inflation slow down. And because demand is going to drop, because people are less likely to go out and try to get mortgages when, you know, the amount that they'd have to afford has gone up so much. So I don't think it's going to be immediate. I think it's going to be slow. And I don't really think we're at the height of a bubble in the same way that we were where we saw that like immediate drop off in the financial crisis, simply because we're not seeing the same kind of things. Siren Eye says, I'm not thinking a bunch of repossessions are likely because the buyers have all been fairly qualified the past several years. Yeah, that exactly. That's the same thing, I think, is that like we've actually got too many buyers right now relative to the total amount of too many qualified buyers versus too few. Dean Jones says, an entire forest died to make this place. I know, like, even just the kitchen alone is like as much wood as gonna be in our entire triplex. Kate says, I think it was meant for something else, but spices ended up there. Yeah, it kind of looks more like it was like a bar, but I also appreciate that there's somewhere to put those Costco-sized versions of spices, because that's a problem I run into, is when you get the really big spice sizes, there's like nowhere in the cabinets to put them. I mean, maybe not as much of a problem if your place is this big, but Cheryl says it's called Blackberry Castle. It was under contract to some adult content filmmakers. That's like how kink.com bought the Armory in San Francisco for a bunch of years. Okay, what Blackberry Castle. Let's find out what this looks like. Roasting overpriced things that definitely no one is going to buy. Okay, so this went for $4 million. It went for $3.9 million in Portland, which is notable because at least that other one was in Connecticut. The Gate 8 home film studio. Their videos will appear on YouTube and Instagram and live streams on Twitches. Well, that sounds not entirely like adult content, because you can't put adult content on Instagram. Blackberry Castle says one of the bathrooms in Blackberry Castle has a Roman spa theme. The mansion colors are wild. Okay. What is on the floor? What is this? Did someone just make up their own crest? Because this looks way too modernly built for there to have been a crest. Oh, and there's also suits of armor. Cool. Oh, that's interesting. That's very interesting. Be Queer Make Stuff says this one looks more like the Disney World version. I don't know. This doesn't look quite like the Disney World version here. Oh my gosh, there's a whole, like, media room with a tiny little, like, it looks like the Hollywood Theater in Portland. Aaron says, honestly, $4 million seems reasonable for that ridiculousness. Probably not located on great transit, but maybe that's fine. They tried selling contents and the owners took possession again. Oh, interesting. Disney World for adults. Yep. Why is there a giant ceiling compass? What is happening? What kind of choices are being made here? Is it work? Is the house gonna move? Do you need the compass to be... that is apparently the West Coast's largest compass. Not a thing I knew I needed to brag about, really. Honestly, I'd go for that. I don't love these kind of stones, but like, that looks like a great home office. It's not quite to my style, but I would accept it. What's up with that? Like, there's like a logo on the wall. They're painted with a European street scene? What do you mean by that? What is happening here? Okay, what's up with this shield? Did someone just like hire someone on Fiverr to make them a shield and then just put it everywhere? The compass is there to tell you when the earth moves. I mean, it seems like a thing we all need right now, right? Also, to be fair, this is Portland, and in Portland, the earth does move pretty frequently. God, this very much honestly reminds me of the design of the Epic campus in Wisconsin. It's really like a vibe. A Yeti ate my sandwich says, love the rock wall. Do you like this kind of rock wall, or do you like with the, like, more natural stones, or do you like the one with, like, the, like, very rounded? Because I don't like the very rounded stones for some reason. I don't know why. Be Queer Make Stuff says, I'm not loving the sponged paint job. Yeah, I don't know if the paint job is really the main complaint one needs to have here, but... what is... Oh, 400 bottle wine cellar. Okay. I mean, good for you. The kitchen was quote-unquote built for feasting. Oh, the Butcher Block Island counter is made from 10,000 individual wood cubes. So, all of the trees that didn't die for that thing in Connecticut died for this kitchen counter here. Additionally, I gotta say, like, I don't feel like this achieves a level of realisticness relative to the amount of money they had to put into it. Go back and look at it. It's a giant clock with a compass rose around it. Oh, it is a clock. Okay. I mean, also weird, but sure. I don't know if that makes it better or not. Be Queer Make Stuff says, I'm not convinced any of this is actual rock. That is also fair. Kate says, we have a ton of money. Let's make the largest compass ever and furnish it from the room place. It's true. Also, does this not look like a tiny version of something that you would find at Home Goods, but it's just like the giant blown up version of it? I do kind of like the ridiculous vent for the stove. Okay, wait, we have to go look to see what the ridiculous vent... Oh, yeah. That vent for the stove, really... You know what this place reminds me of? Jungle Gyms in Cincinnati. Like, each area is totally wild. It's a grocery store that has, like, it has an actual, like, monorail in it and, like, a bunch of talking animals and a yacht inside of it with a band of animatronic animals based on serial characters that play music. And I feel like this looks like something, the vent looks like something that would be like in the section of cheeses or something at Jungle Gyms. Craig says, this would also be great if you owned a Medieval Times franchise. Yeah, you know, I've been trying to think of a justification for me to get a medieval, like, archeress outfit. So maybe I need to go take a visit up here. Be Queer Make Stuff says, it's a grocery store with talking animals, and what are you talking about? Portland is wild. Actually, this is in Cincinnati, Ohio. Like, the definition of boring. It wasn't even in Cincinnati, it was in Fairfield, which is a suburb of Cincinnati. There's like 3 locations. Let me show you Jungle Gyms, because this is one of my favorite things to explain to people. Because this was actually the grocery store that we shopped at growing up. It was like one of the main... grocery. I don't know if we should go to their website or like just see what we can. So this was like actually the grocery store. It's massive. It's like impossible to like accurately describe how big it is. But yes, this is not a Portland thing. This is a Cincinnati, Ohio thing. So like, here's a nice example. Every like aisle will be themed. So essentially, the guy who started at Jim started it as like a farmer stand, but he was really actually just selling cocaine. And essentially the farmer stand was mainly a front for his drug business, as far as we can tell. And so this is what happens if you have more money than you know what to do with and run a farmer's market stand and you let it grow into like a cocaine-fueled international market grocery store. Cheryl says, do you remember when you won a habit trail from Jungle Gyms? Yes. And like notably in the, so it has tons of animatronic animals. And like, if you go to the pet section near where I won the habit trail, there's like a bunch of singing crows. So they'll get animatronic animals and they'll be like whatever is, kind of themed around it. So like, there's an actual like, yeah. It's very hard to accurately describe. Let's see if I can find the yacht for you. Yeah, okay. So this is what this looks like. Here's some pictures. So there are animatronic animals outside that sing to you, "Welcome to Jungle Gyms," as you walk in. Cheryl says, I don't think he sold anything illicit. No, he definitely did, because I watched so there's a movie theater inside of the grocery store, and it tells you about the history of Jungle Gyms, and yes, they play movies about the history of Jungle Gyms. They had one guy whose job it was to buy weird stuff for the store. Imagine having that job. That sounds fantastic. Yeah, so so this is an actual yacht, and then these all play songs. Like, all of the animals play on a loop as animatronic animals, that are, like, essentially, and that's a full-size... Please see the vegetables next to it for scale. That is an actual, like, full-sized yacht. What other things are in it? So yeah, like, in the honey section, there'll be, like, a giant bee. There's a gorilla, Elvis, that's, like, very notable, who plays songs. Also, this is what their bathrooms look like. So these are, like, proper bathrooms, and it looks like you're just, like, walking into, looks like you're walking into the, like, porta potties, but actually there's a regular bathroom inside. Ablejack says that is not a yacht. Okay, but what is it? It's a very large boat. It's a very large boat. Doesn't it accurately fall under yacht? What is the size at which something is a yacht? This is an important question for Ablejack. Be Queer Make Stuff says, I think I would die of overstimulation. I will note that one thing that's, like, it's hard to capture in these photos. It's a really, really big place. So you have to understand that you're seeing all of these things, and, like, you actually see them at a much slower rate because it's such a large place. But also, you don't really die of overstimulation when it is the main place you're used to. Because, like, my mom would take me there shopping all the time as a kid, and so I just thought this was a normal place. Oh yeah, here's a picture of the monorail going into the... Also, they, like, bought the monorail, and then they, like, didn't finish it for a really long time. Like, 20 plus years, 30 years, maybe. So there was just, like, an empty monorail they had bought from the zoo. Ablejack says, not yacht, just a boat. Yacht is when you pay someone else to be the captain. Well, I'm pretty sure those animals are not the captain of that boat. Do you really think that the Lucky Charms, like, leprechaun is piloting that boat? Yeah. Also, there's, like, a separate, like, underneath the yacht, there's, like, a bunch of things underneath the, underneath it that are, like, stores for tack, and they all have a bunch of that. Yes, it's very weird. Dean says, is this where you got your love of transport from? Well, to be fair, I never actually got a ride in the monorail because they didn't finish it until I left. Apparently it wasn't from the zoo, it was from Kings Island. I always thought it was from the zoo for some reason. Kings Island is a theme park in Cincinnati. Yep. What else can we show you with this? It's very hard to accurately describe Jungle Gyms. There's, like, an entire section for hot sauce, and they, like, have a whole wall that they'll only let you try with a waiver, and they have, like, live cooking demonstrations in it as well. It's very hard to explain just how weird Jungle Gyms is. Anyway, there's our nice real estate hack there. Craig F says, a grocery shopping experience inspired by Chuck E. Cheese's. Like, but Chuck E. Cheese is, like, not that good, and Chuck E. Cheese is, like, not nearly as good as Jungle Gyms. Jungle Gyms is, like, notable enough that there are, like, tons of YouTube videos of people, like, vlogging, visiting Jungle Gyms, like, people coming from other states to visit Jungle Gyms. It's very hard. Be Queer Make Stuff says, we should go back to the fake castle because there were walls in that room that looked like poo. Okay, like they were painted with poo? Is that what was going on? You seem very focused on this, so we'll have to look at it. Where? Oh, is it this room? I don't think that's particularly great. Cheryl Crow says, it took you through a safari exhibit. Yeah, it's hard to really explain. Beaker Wig Stuff says, I am focused, yes. Okay, wait, so is this the room that we feel like is painted? Because I don't think it's that bad. I know Abel Jack wants us to get back to finance, but we talked about finance enough. I said we were going to be roasting weird houses. Oh, this room. Oh, never mind. I realized I wasn't sharing my iPad. This room is the room that looks like it's painted with poo, right? Never mind. I fixed it. Yes, correct. Yeah, I have a lot of questions about this. I would not feel particularly calm. Maybe this is like the, you know, the inner layer of IBS or something. I don't know. Oh my god, this is the kitchen that looks most normal, and it's like the service kitchen in the outdoor oasis. Oh, it also has a 15-foot tall climbing wall. Cool. Well, that's nice and depressing. Okay. So, we had this other one submitted that was... Oh no, did it go away? There we go. Okay. Here's another depressing listing, not a castle. This is an $800,000 Fairfax, Virginia home being sold cash offers only, no access to see lower level. Home sold as is with acknowledgement that the home will convey with persons living in lower level with no lease in place. Apparently someone came at some point to clean this house and said that they didn't have a place to stay and then just moved into the basement and never paid rent. So yeah, the rest of the listing does not make it look particularly great either. Like, if you want to talk about bad staging, take your recycling out, people. $800,000 for this. Be Queer Make Stuff says, okay, you know, that's ballsy. Props to that, honestly. I mean, way to just be like, I'm moving in and never pay rent, I guess. Like, also not dealing with the... Here's the thing. It would take so little effort to stage this better than it is currently staged. What happened? Also, what is this photo? What real estate agent was like, this $800,000 house, this is a photo we need to include in it? Oh my gosh, that is not a safe deck at all. Ooh. $856,000 is what this sold for. This is depressing. I am depressed by this. What? Just... This room looks fine. I mean, they kind of staged... They didn't stage it. They cleaned it before they put it up, but they didn't quite stage it. Also, like, someone moved with their camera when they took that one. What is this? There's just pants on the counter. You too can sell a home with zero staging for $850,000 in today's housing market. This is very depressing. Okay, well, there we go. Yeah, the lone tipped over planter really does it for me. Just like, they're just like, well, also, what happened to this table? Like, just get rid of the table. And no access to the lower level. Let's not forget that part. I know, the lower level with someone squatting is not even, there's not even a picture taken of it. Maybe an for sale by owner. I can't imagine an agent did this at staging. Well, we can see it was already sold, so I think we can see if there's an agent. I think a lot of real estate agents just don't care anymore because they know things are going to sell. Does anybody know on Zillow if there's a way to tell if it's sold by an agent or sold by owner? I thought it had to. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm not seeing it. Do the pants come with the house? I mean, you know, if you really want to beat the other offers in this competitive market, you're going to have to waive inspection. And don't be demanding things like including the pants. I mean, that would be too unreasonable in the kind of housing market we're currently in. Well, now I'm thoroughly depressed. Is it time to eat a donut? Let's eat a donut while we, okay. Donut time. Oh, it didn't work. Donut? Did it work? We don't know if it's gonna work. Donut is coming. Be Queer Make Stuff says, yes, soothe the pain with sugar. I agree. Okay, I'm sorry that we don't have a better donut light today, but we have this donut, which is a ube bika donut, and it's got like a rice ball up there, and then coconut flakes, and then ube on the top, which is like purple sweet potato. Beaker Make Stuff says, oh my god, donut intro. Yeah, we've had that for a while. I don't know if we've always been consistent about putting it up. Oh, wow. That is very sugary. Like, you know when the primary flavor of something is just sugar? That's what this icing tastes like. A Yeti ate my sandwich says, it's a little scary for a donut. You must be new here. This isn't even that weird. I want to get that rice ball, but this is a very hefty donut. It's like a raised donut on the inside. I'm liking the donut insides, but frankly, I'm not getting the sweet potato taste, and it mostly just tastes like sugar. I mean, the coconut rice ball looks great. If you get a bite of the rice ball with the sugar topping, then it's okay. Cheryl says, just take the ball out. No, I need to experience it together. Also, it's surprisingly well stuck on there. I'm gonna crash from this amount of sugar. I mean, should I, like, press it down, or should I eat it on its own? Now it's not a rice ball, it's like a squashed rice. The sticky rice ball is the best part. I gotta say, I could just have gotten a sticky rice ball. Honestly, I think it's a 2 out of 5. It's like too sugary. Yeah. I think it's a 2 out of 5. I like the rice ball, 5 out of 5. But yep. Echoes of the, is it a vegetable discussion? Is it just a meme at this point? Discussion. Is it a sweet potato or is it yam? Is a yam a sweet potato? Vice versa. Neither. That is a very important question because I don't really understand the difference of them. I think a sweet potato is like round and a yam is long. That's at least how I rang them up when I worked at a grocery store, but Dean says, seems like it's not the sum of its parts. I just think it doesn't have enough of the ube, like the sweet potato taste to it. I mean, I have coconut stuck in my mouth. A Yeti ate my sandwich says, I'm totally surprised that sugar was the problem with it. Well, one of the donuts for this month is like a full-on calzone inside of it, I believe. So we'll have one of the savory donuts this month. But yeah, I would have liked to just frankly have the sticky rice ball. That would have been fine. So tell me your, terror stories or your happy stories. When it comes to the housing market. Does anybody have anything uplifting to add when it comes to the housing market, or are we all just depressed and want nothing to do with all of this? Mimi says, I've searched on Happy Cow for donuts in Buffalo, but no luck. The vegan bakery has various vegan desserts, but no donuts. I may have to learn how to make them. That sounds like so much more work, though. I'm sorry. Maybe this is your destiny. Maybe you are going to open a vegan donut shop in Buffalo. That's such a bummer. I will say that if you have, I don't think Buffalo does, but if you have a pretty high population of Vietnamese immigrants, there are a lot of Vietnamese donut shops that are stealthily vegan. That if they're run by Vietnamese Buddhists, essentially there are some Vietnamese Buddhist vegan donut shops that are accidentally vegan. So you might be able to seek it out, especially if you have the ability to speak Vietnamese with some owners. But yeah, I'd go to Mimi's Donuts. Sounds like a good reason to visit Buffalo is Mimi's Donuts. Then I can do a talking dough and eating donuts from Buffalo. And try out your donuts at your donut shop. Don't you like how we just have given you a new job, assigned it to you? Here, yeah, how are people doing? Apparently, looking for vegan donuts on Happy Cow. I'm gonna say, this is, my mouth still feels very sugary. Mimi says, I will make vegan donuts. Just, try to get a deep fryer if you don't have one. I had a Fry Daddy Jr., and that was, my favorite thing for deep frying stuff. It was just, a tiny tabletop deep fryer, and it was so much better than trying to, pan fry stuff. Also, I think there's a Try Guys episode where they try to make donuts without a recipe, but the flip side of that is that they do actually explain how to properly make donuts in that episode. They get experts in. So I feel like that is maybe useful for making one's own donuts. Cheryl says, I think we inherited the tiny fryer. Yeah, I bought it when I lived in Cincinnati in my apartment. And then when I moved out here for 6 months, 18 years ago or whatever, I stored some kitchen stuff in my parents' basement, and then they just inherited the deep fryer, and they used it for a bunch of political organizing, so I'm sure it went to good use. Dean says, I saw a donut machine on a pier once. Ooh. Time for a father-daughter waffle fryer. Wait, is a waffle fryer different than a deep fryer? Or... yeah, that's a real question. Oh, falafel fryer. Yes, my dad and I got very into making falafel for a while, and we became convinced that we were going to open a falafel cart together in Cincinnati. This was our master plan. Little conveyor belt which flipped the dough and then flipped it again in the sugar, and the donuts were warm. I mean, that does sound kind of amazing. They do not have a donut machine downstairs at the donut shop. Revelation, though, to see how the donuts get made. Literally how the donuts get made. I was mostly very worried about all of the donut shop employees here when we had the crazy high heat, because I was like, oh my god, they're frying things in the heat, which incidentally is what voodoo employees got fired over refusing to work because they didn't have any AC in their kitchen. But this donut shop did not. All right, y'all. I think we're going to wrap up for this week. We have our nice depressing statistics about the housing market. You know, the good news is that single family housing starts are up. Building permits are up. And interest rates are up. And all of that is probably going to lead to at least a downward pressure on the rate of growth of housing prices. So hopefully we're going to see less shacks get sold to be torn down for $4 million. That's definitely what I would hope. But yes. Mimi says, Buffalo housing market is nothing like the big cities, but recently a condemned house on my suburban street was sold for $165K and being flipped. That price seems high to us. I mean, complete sympathy, because I wish that 165 seemed high to us. It was probably just 15 years ago in Portland. So, but I think you have the weather to keep away some of the in-migration in Buffalo that we've seen in Portland. Because, like, you know, the median home price in Portland was below 200K just like 15 years ago. And our average salary has not risen nearly at the rate of the average cost of housing. So it will get better. It will get better, I hope. I do think a lot of people are probably going to be renting for longer than they might have liked. And, you know, I do actually think that one solution to what's going on with the housing market might be to put better restrictions in place about how much rent can go up. So, you know, we don't have rent stabilization or rent control in my state. However, there was a housing crisis in Portland already prior to the pandemic. And because of that, in the city of Portland, there is a limit on how much rent can go up per year without having to pay relocation assistance to tenants. So if you raise the rent by more than 10% in a 12-month period, regardless of whether or not you have a lease with the tenants, and that's cumulative. So if you raise it 2.5% and then you raise it 2.5% again 3 months later and then 2.5%. Anyway, if it goes up more than 10% in the course of a year, that's considered an economic eviction and you have to pay relocation assistance, which is like a chunk of change as a landlord. And one thing that has done, even though we are not allowed to implement rent stabilization or rent control, you know, you can raise the rent, but you'll have to, on the flip side, pay this money to tenants in order to support them to be able to find another house. That has done an excellent job of at least bringing down some of the massive rental hike prices that we're seeing. And I do think that implementing things like that on city levels, especially in places where rental prices are going up a ton, might put some downward pressure on the demand in the housing market, because a lot of what's going on in the housing market right now is investors buying houses, making a bet that rent will keep going up, especially people that have more flexibility in order to be able to buy because they are, you know, not just a first-time home buyer. And I think that could have potential, you know, normally. So bad things usually happen to renters when you implement rent stabilization and rent control. It sounds really great, but then, you know, there's no incentive for the landlord to update the property. They might actually try to make it unlivable so that people move and they can up the rent. Then you see a ton of other fees like we see in New York City, where there are more rent controlled units. You see other kinds of fees like key fees or broker's fees or other kinds of fees that essentially get put into the price because rent is controlled and stabilized. But the relocation assistance is kind of an interesting way around it, because at least it slightly makes landlords think about doing economic relocation. And at the very least, it gives a chunk of change to a renter when they're trying to seek in the market. Those houses were something. Well done, everyone who collected such examples. I try not to worry for us all. I mean, I appreciated ending on the castles. Mimi says, yeah, the big tech companies are not relocating here. Yeah, we didn't actually have, you know, I know that that's something that's going on with Texas right now, and part of the reason their housing market is so majorly affected is that we're seeing a lot of like Tesla moved there, Wells Fargo moved there from California. So we're seeing like the no income tax environment of Texas and relatively low regulation compared to California. I mean, that's like the understatement of the century, but we are seeing like large companies relocate to Texas, and that's part of what's putting pressure on so much of Texas's housing market. Portland did not really see quite the same thing. What we saw was something similar to what might be happening in Buffalo. So like Buffalo is becoming one, right? It's becoming a destination for people that want cheap energy for things like crypto mining. And two, it because of the attractive housing prices relative to the rest of the state, if people can stand the weather in Buffalo, and they no longer have to commute into the city, for some people they're able to buy more land, whatever, because it's like 6 hours. It's like 6 hours away, right, from New York City. Buffalo, is it farther than that? But if you work from home and you now only need to go into New York City once a month or something like that versus, every day, then I think you're going to have some of the same thing that happened in Portland, which is that we had a lot of people, even prior to the pandemic, that were able to work remote for Bay Area companies. And they came in with their ridiculous salaries that did not match our local Portland salaries and were outbidding everybody in Portland for housing, which is why we essentially had the first rental vacancy crisis here. So Mimi says the city of Buffalo is building many low-rise apartment buildings. Many young people want to live in the city. I mean, I'm glad that they're building apartment buildings. It's a good sign, right? Because building is the way that you kind of prevent that. But many people, young people, want to live in the city. Do you mean the city of New York City, or do you mean just in that proper city versus like the suburbs of Buffalo? Are there like a bunch of suburbs of Buffalo, or is it just kind of like a large incorporated area? I don't have a good sense of it. It's like 200,000-ish people. Is that right? Am I vastly underestimating it? 256,000. The city of Buffalo, about 7 to 8 hours from New York City. Okay, yeah. Well, I think it would be interesting to see what is going to happen with like people that work from home that like, yeah, they're willing to, drive 8 hours. They're drive 8 hours into New York City once a quarter or once a month, that are looking at much cheaper kind of housing prices. And the downside, right, is the taxes are still just the same because there isn't really a tax escape up there. Cheryl says, I just spent the morning walking around a neighborhood near looking for rentals for a friend. Looking for apartments is much more fun than houses for sale. Yeah, I mean, we do have a lot more inventory for apartments in Portland right now, which is, I think, nice. It's not like when we first had the apartment housing crisis in Portland, when we had rental vacancy at 0.5%, it was like impossible to find anything. And you know how we got out of that? We built a lot of apartments, and then we stopped having the same kind of crisis with apartments. Craig says, true statements about Texas. Value of our house has gone up almost 50% in 2 years. That is a wild increase. Yeah, it is really interesting to see what's happening with Texas. I'm really curious about how much Texas is going to be able to maintain this no income tax situation that they have. It seems like property taxes and HOA fees really do kind of make up for a lot of that. And then what's your sales tax? And yeah, I'm really interested because they're giving a lot of benefits right now to corporations to lure them to Texas. And in the end, we usually see that is that does not work out well for tax bases, but 6.25% sales tax is pretty low in Texas. Mimi says corporations would rather relocate to Texas than New New York State, probably due to taxes, as you mentioned. Conservative politics are no deterrent to liberal companies. Correct. Also, all of the largest growth in housing markets that we've seen in the US in the past 2 years has been in the Sun Belt, essentially. So a lot of it has been people essentially going for lower prices because housing prices are lower, cost of living is lower in most of the South. And additionally, a lot of them are seeking out better weather. So Cheryl says places like Huston have no zoning. Well, but here's the thing. Like, I actually did a paper about this a bunch of years ago for urban economics. But when you actually look at Texas, even though there is no zoning officially, homeowners associations have essentially replaced zoning because it has the highest percentage of participation in homeowners associations, and essentially they act as quasi-governmental agencies and do enforce zoning in a lot of the same ways. I mean, they have no urban planning, and that is for sure, right? Which is why you end up with things so sprawled in Texas, and you've got cities that essentially run into one another, Fort Worth, Dallas much. But the homeowners associations actually do a lot of the stuff that that zoning normally does in Texas. And it's not as unregulated as people kind of make the impression that it might be. Christopher says, in Toronto area, I bought my last townhome in 2001, pre-built for $221,000. In 2020, it was sold for $550,000. I checked with my former neighbor a year later in the middle of COVID lockdown, $650,000. Oh my gosh. I'm so sorry. That sounds very stressful. Yeah. I mean, to have that level of increase in 20 years is pretty notable, but Toronto has had one of the worst housing markets for like how long, right? Like Toronto has had like the spike really started in like 2009-ish. In Toronto. So yeah, I don't know. That's another city where the things are really, really sprawled out, right? Toronto. And you've got this like super dense middle of the city in Toronto, and then the sprawl just kind of continues forever. And it's, I mean, you could drive for 2 hours before you find affordable housing in Toronto under the bid rent function. Cheryl says expensive houses can be adjacent to horrible factories in Texas. That's interesting because I don't think that that's as true as it once was. Mimi says, Christopher, we miss visiting Toronto for the good Chinese restaurants and shopping in general. Oh yeah, coming from Buffalo, right? Are there people who live in Buffalo who commute to Toronto? I have questions. Are there super commuters that go over the line? Because I know there's a lot of people in Detroit, right, that go to Toronto. Are there super commuters that actually like travel the whole way? Because like you could go out to Hamilton, right, is like not even terribly far. Christopher says you can always visit. It's only a 2-hour drive. Yeah, and, you know, if you want to go to the greater Toronto area, you don't even have to drive 2 hours from Buffalo, right? Dean says London prices are oof. Well, so London is, I think, even more special than a lot of other places. But one of the things that's really influencing the London prices that's very fascinating is the fact that essentially a ton of the housing that exists in London now can't be moved. And that is physically moved off the market because of the Grenfell Tower disaster, which was that huge tower that burned in London. A lot of people died. This was, I think, 2017. I want to say 2017. But after the Grenfell Tower, essentially there was a serious attempt to figure out how to not have crises like that happen again. And they figured out that one of the reasons that it went up so fast and that the fire spread so quickly was because of the cladding on the outside of it. So now a bunch of changes went into place where essentially they're now saying that cladding has to be fixed on high-rise towers that have this. The downside of this is that if you have a leasehold or a freehold in one of these towers in London, then you are stuck with a house you can't sell until the outer cladding gets fixed. But a lot of these are tower blocks with like 400 plus units in it, and everyone in your building has to be able to afford like 20,000, 30,000 pounds to change the cladding on the outside before anybody is able to actually even legally sell their apartment building anymore. And so for a lot of people, they're continuing to pay into these essentially worthless apartment buildings, right? They're continuing to pay their mortgage each month on these fire traps of buildings because they can't get the capital necessarily together to replace the cladding on the outside. And so, yeah, it's like a huge issue in London because essentially you have a bunch of supply that's now artificially constrained because of very real, very serious safety concerns. So yeah, it's definitely interesting to look at how that was impacting it. Dean says 2017, yes, June, I think. Yeah, I thought it was 2017. So anyway, they passed all of those kind of restrictions on trading with the cladding and the engineering sign-offs that have to happen for buildings with that kind of cladding where essentially it needs to be replaced. That all like got implemented midway through 2021. And it's a huge, huge issue because essentially like, whew. Mimi says, pandemic border restrictions deter us from driving. It's an easy 2-hour drive. There's commuters to Hamilton area, but I haven't heard of Toronto. I mean, that makes sense. That would be like a pretty long one. Toronto road traffic is insane, seems to me. So maybe that's not practical for commuting from Buffalo. That's probably true. Although maybe like if you didn't have to go in on a regular basis. But yeah, I mean, it would be, I mean, you can cross now, right? I don't think the pandemic border restrictions are really an issue anymore, right? Do we all collectively decide the pandemic is over? Okay. Once we get to that portion of the stream, it might actually be time to be done. Dean says, yep, it was a horrific event that led to the discovery of a whole lot of bad stuff. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is like an attempt to fix it. It's like, yeah. Christopher says, nah, I just forgot this is not just a North American problem. My friends who live in London can't afford to live in London. I think I will say that affording to live in London is a problem that has existed for as long as London has been around. So, you know, London has a very constrained amount of land that they built on, and then everything got even more fucked when they put the motorway around it. And yeah, I mean, London, they won't build up enough, and they tried to build too late, I think, in my impression. All right, y'all. I think we are, I think we're done. I think we're done for the evening. I still have to study. I will be doing study streams this week. If you are interested in joining for some of these, like me trying out these study with me streams, they're good if you just want to like work on projects, work on your work. We just play lo-fi music in the background, and then I put a Pomodoro timer up on the screen. We work in 50-minute Pomodoros, and then we have a 10-minute break. So the only like talking that will happen is during the break. But yeah, it just can be like a good way to have some accountability. I know like it's just going to be me sitting at my computer. We did 3 of them this week. I thought it was kind of interesting. It is really hard to get notifications on YouTube. So if you do want to get notifications about it, you can sign up for the SMS alerts and I'll send them out. The first one for this week will be tomorrow at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. Which would be 9 p.m. GMT, I believe. So if you are interested in joining, I thought they were kind of a nice chill way, no pressure, no interesting content. But join the text crew if you want to get notified about that. And that one's already up and listed, so you can set a reminder as well. All right. Well, thank you all for joining this week to hopefully looking at the weird castles and jungle gyms uplifted your spirits for what is a pretty depressing topic. And I appreciate you joining. I will also be here next week for Finance and Donuts, same time, same place, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern on Sunday nights. And we'll have some study streams this week as well. Dean says, I set a reminder for the next one because I have to get back to the real world this week. Yeah, you were on like a self-imposed spring break last week, right? Angela says, goodbye. Have a good week, everyone. Thanks for joining, Angela. Mimi says, I can join the Pomodoro sessions if they're midday later Pacific time. Take care and have a good week. All right. Thank you. Cheers. Bye. Oh, now I don't know how to turn it off.